Welcome back to the Musical Connections podcast. This is NextIIConnect. I'm your host, Zach Snow, and we are going to introduce you to one of the faces of the hardcore and heavy metal scene here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Through acts like Slowpoke and Order of the Precious Blood, he is building this metal scene one song at a time. And this group was nominated for the 2023 Loud Artist of the Year, which ended up going to legendary group The Slime. But he's an amazing guy, amazing musician, and just overall great dude. Joining me right now to talk all about Precious Blood and a whole lot more, my man, Benedict, or as in his case we call him, Ben Chapman-Smith. Ben, how you doing, brother?
Great, Zach. Thank you. Very welcome. Lovely introduction, my friend.
And also, I do know everything.
You see, I mean, our own little Nardwar, aren't you?
And for the record, I'm kind of referencing the Game of Thrones here. You don't know nothing, Jon Snow, Jon Snow, Jon Snow.
I was planning on doing a couple Zach Sneeze throughout the interview for sure. It's a beautiful snow day. It's a snowy day, and we got an interview with Zach Snow. So that's what you want to do on a snow day, guys.
Absolutely. We're recording this on a snow day, and then this will air next month. So who knows? Maybe a snow day then too.
Hey, you never know.
Exactly. So for those who don't know much about you, of course, I know quite a bit about you. You played in the group Order of the Precious Blood with Paul Brake, Cameron Legg, and a bunch of other great people in there. And I see one of your shows. They're Riot. And you played in the Music NL award-winning group Slowpoke. But tell me a little bit more about yourself for those who may not know much about Ben Chapman-Smith.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, Ben Chapman-Smith. I'm a music educator. I do some audio engineering stuff and musician. I actually primarily think of myself as a guitar player. I've also worked extensive. I've got a pretty varied background in the music industry. I've worked as a promoter. I've worked as in bands, not only the heavy scene though. I also have played in pop and ska and all kinds of even folk singer-songwriter stuff. So I really do try to the creative expression is always going to be over genre to me. That's a really big part of kind of my general ethos and how I approach music. I'm a huge advocate of just facilitating people's expression of themselves, right? Just creating more opportunities for artists and people to express themselves through music is kind of my MO. So my teaching is all about me sharing my love and joy of music with people and helping to, try to instill that whenever possible. Because it's been great for me, and I love to give that to other people. And the same thing is true with live music. It's all about trying to create great experiences and cool memories, because some of the coolest times in my life have been going to shows and seeing absurd things and being like, that was, what? I want to do that. Right? So that's I'd say that's most of it. Mostly a player, teacher, a bit of event stuff, and
Yeah, and you're originally not from Newfoundland. You were born in Toronto, Ontario, the big city, and you moved here a couple of years ago, and you've been here ever since. So I want to really go back though to how you first got into music in the first place. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, there's always the standard stuff of my parents had pictures of me when I was like a child, like 2 or 3, playing with guitars and stuff like that. So there's always been that kind of surface level interest in guitars, maybe just because it was around.
Oh yeah.
I think like a lot of people, music functions, especially early on in your life, as a major kind of way to define yourself, especially in your early teenage years. And I just took to that like you couldn't believe. So I always really liked music, but certainly around grade 7 or 8, I started really thinking there's something to this. And I was a bit of a late bloomer as a musician. I only picked up the guitar in grade 9, so I was about 13. And it was just like immediately like, oh my God, where has this been? And lots of just really excessive. I still remember one of my first guitar lessons. I came back trying to learn how to play Lithium by Nirvana.
Oh, nice.
And I literally played until I had blisters on my fingers, and I came into my lesson with blisters on my fingers and played the riffs, and my guitar teacher was like, holy shit, dude, like, calm down. Like, uh, so, and, that's just as, just because it plays, I want to say just because I picked up guitar too, I think there's going to be a lot of people just assuming it's like, oh, so you must only like heavy metal and rock. And it's like, I love jazz. My early childhood, I really liked, and I still really like thinking music more as an emotional expressor and finding different varieties of that. So like, I'm, again, I totally understand that people are going to associate me with being, metal or punk musician and all that kind of a thing. But to me, that's just a really cool part of the expression.
That's wonderful. Now, I want to go back to the blisters for a second. When you had those blisters, did you pull a Ringo Starr and said, "I got blisters on my fingers"?
Is it a Ringo Starr?
Yeah, Ringo said that in Helter Skelter.
I probably made a big deal about it. Yeah, I'm more than like, not intentionally, but I'm sure that I was like, you wear those things as a badge of honor when it's just, you're putting everything into it. And again, it's not even like you're trying to prove it to people. It's just when you really love doing something, you just keep doing it.
Oh, yeah.
No, as a kind of passive note, I have eczema on my fingers sometimes, and like I'll have to be playing my instrument, and it's like, wow. I've got a cracked open thumb, and it's like, what do? You continue playing Boys Are Back in Town. You continue playing that riff. You just keep doing it.
Nice. Nice. So I just want to talk about like what drew you to the genre in the first place. Of course, you mentioned Nirvana, and you played their song Lithium. I think it's either on In Utero or Nevermind. I think it's on Nevermind.
I honestly don't know. I'm so bad with like album tracks and stuff like that. My entire thing with music is I like putting it on and letting it take me somewhere. So there's certainly some bands and sometimes where I've gotten really nitpicky about knowing details and every song name on that album kind of a thing. I've had albums like that for the most part. It's kind of like, I really like that artist. I like the places they take me.
So what drew you to the heavy metal scene in the first place?
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I think certainly my earlier music tastes were definitely towards the more mainstream, I wouldn't even say mainstream, but like rock and pop, the stuff that you would grow up to being a 90s kid, right? The standard stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So that was always a big influence on it. There's also the fact that it was just, it's a very accessible kind of music. Like you listen to, some classical pieces, right? And like, it's great, but it's somewhat inaccessible unless you're really, really intellectualizing the thing. And for live music, that makes it a bit of a barrier to entry for a lot of people. Because, if you have ever been to the opera or something like that, it's hard to become like immersed in the scene, which I'm sure no one would use that terminology, but it's a bit harder to become an avid fan of that. But when you're sneaking into shows underage in Toronto, and you get to experience like the high energy, just craziness, and I want to say danger, but that's not like, yeah, we'll say danger, whatever.
Yeah, why not?
The intensity of a punk rock show, it's very enticing. It's a really cool experience. It's a really cool feeling, and being a part of it is awesome. So, and again, like the fact that I play in a hardcore band is the main, and played in like a doom metal punk psychedelic band, whatever. I go see a lot of different shows and I participate in a lot of other parts of the scenes, but I've always just been drawn to the elements that are in those scenes, the high energy. I'm a big fan of kind of modern, cool, distorted guitar sounds and stuff like that. So there's something about being in a physical space with the kind of gear you find in that environment, which is, amplifiers that are turned up to 9 or 10 or 11 even, and you just get to bathe in this over harmonic sounds bouncing off everywhere. It's really cool, right? And it's not the same necessarily. You'd find that in most rock stuff, but compared to, maybe the traditional Newfoundland music scene, you'd certainly, get some elements of that, but it's not going to be the same intention or experience. And again, like I do sound somewhat frequently for a lot of trad musicians, and I love that scene and I love that circle, and that stuff is great. And but it's not quite as exciting to me, I will say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were like one of the big faces of the metal scene up in Toronto. I believe the band you were in the first off was Vices and Virtues. I think I may be getting that wrong. If you want to correct me there, but you were in some
Yeah.
other bands too. So tell me a little bit about the bands you were part of when you were in the metal scene in Toronto.
So Toronto was a very, and even more so. I mean, I would say that I was part of a metal scene in that I worked as a, I guess it's kind of like a concert promoter capacity, event organizer thing where I organized something called Hardcore Wednesdays at a venue called The Cage.
Oh wow.
For about 2 years, we did weekly events that started off on Wednesdays and got successful, and we started doing Saturdays. So I'd say that that's my main the way that a lot of more people would probably know me in Toronto's heavy scene. That and the band Head Loss, which was like a stoner rock project that I played bass in, which was a lot of fun. But my thing with Toronto was it kind of goes back to the ramblings that I was making earlier about how, music to me is almost like existential journalism. Like that's almost how I look at it. Is like, what are the various different cool emotions and feelings? So like Vices and Virtues, the way that I always perceived that was kind of like a funk rock group, and that was a lot of fun. That was more, I wouldn't even necessarily call it a studio project, but one of those early groups that you play with. I think we played like a couple of times, but it wasn't like a big project that got a lot of attention. A lot of fun, and a great learning experience. And again, just every band is an opportunity to write songs and say what you're feeling at that time, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what I gravitate to the stuff for. But beyond Vices and Virtues, so yeah, there was a bunch. The first band I would say that I was in was a band called Molly Doll, and that would have been when I was around 13 or 14. I joined the group on guitar, and it was good, but the singer was a little he had a lot of vision, and it was sometimes hard to communicate that to the rest of the group. So long term, that didn't end up working out too well. I moved on to a punk band called Wrath Riot, which I stayed in for quite a while, played the most shows, or quite a few shows with that band. I joined that group on drums, and then quickly they heard me play guitar, and they were like, okay, we're going to find a different drummer. You're playing guitar, which was wonderful. And then after that, I left with the drummer, sorry, man, of that band, and started a group called, it ended up being a couple of different groups. The first was Solar Messiah, but that never became a thing. These are all just high school era bands, right?
Yeah.
So we did that, and that evolved into something that actually did end up gigging a bit, which was my favorite band name I've ever come up with, called Garfield the Movie the Band, which was very much hardcore punk and metal and that kind of super riffy stuff. But I mean, I also did stuff like I did a duo called the Ice Kings in Toronto, which was me and a singer named Kira May, who, if you're not familiar with Kira May, look up the name Kira May, because she is fantastic. She's a vocalist that does a lot of work with loopers, and she will sit there and construct her entire song palette using her voice. She's doing everything from creating the kicks and the snare sounds live, and then layering really interesting vocal harmonies over top of it in this beautiful, breathing, captivating way. Kira May, check it out. Yeah, so I mean, I did stuff like that. There were, a lot of high school. I was in at least around 3 or 4 groups. And that involved everything from, people jamming Led Zeppelin covers to, and that's the great thing about Toronto is I could just take the TTC anywhere. So I could just like hop on a train for 45 minutes, go to the opposite end of the entire city, find a couple of people off Craigslist in that area, and just like see if a project works. And
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'm kind of rambling again, but most of that is to say, in Toronto, a lot of what I did was just kind of jump around and play different places and things, and organize a bunch of shows. And the bands that I was really in that gigged were, so I mean, if they played one gig, I'll include them in this list. Under the Influence, Molly Doll, we'll go back to that, Wrath Riot, Garfield the Movie the Band, Noise, there is more. We'll say Head Loss, Stray Sheep. Stray Sheep was a fun project because I was working as a promoter at the Cage at that time, and this great punk band kept on coming in, but they couldn't keep a drummer. So I was like, I had just left another project because I didn't have time for it, and I was like, I'll play bass. Or sorry, they couldn't keep a bass player. So I was like, screw it, I'll play bass for you. And I recorded my first ever DIY album with them, which I still have some copies of, actually.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun, and that was a great little project. And then I ended up leaving that to pursue a band called Head Loss, which was, I would say, my most successful project. And certainly if people knew me in the scene, it would be from the Cage 292 Hardcore Wednesday shows, or probably Head Loss, maybe Stray Sheep. And then I also did a folk, to keep going,
Go for it.
A folk punk project called Benedict Drinks, which is not as much of a admittance that I drink a lot as much as it was sometimes a combination of words just has a certain, there's something about the phrase that evokes a feeling that you're like, that fits with the artistic expression I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say something, I'm trying to prepare you for something that's a bit boisterous and a little bit like off kilter, and like I used to call it sleaze jazz, but it was, the idea was, you know, playing kind of hip, nice, cool progressions that had stuff going on, but in a very brash way. And, you know, lyrical content that was certainly, you know, centered around, it's not all just lovey-dovey stuff that's a little bit darker. Tends to be a theme with a lot of the music I like. Not always, but often pops up. So there you go. That's kind of my history in Toronto. And I spent a ton of time throughout that also studying music, taking, you know, multiple lessons a week, primarily on guitar, but also drums and vocals. And I taught down there. I mean, it was 27 years, dude. So there's quite a bit that I did down there.
That's crazy. So, but this is what I love doing the podcast for, just to go through your journey, you know, going from like, you know, when you started in music to your high school bands, to the bands, you know, such like as Head Loss, Stray Sheep, and Benedict Drinks, to when you made the move to come to Newfoundland and Labrador. And you've been here for about 4 or 5 years or so. So why make the move to Newfoundland? And what was one of the motivating factors that made you decide to come here and stay here?
I will quickly mention, too, there was also a lot of high school music stuff that I did that I will leave out for now just for the sake of brevity. But there was also... it keeps going, man. Why did I come down here? That's a really good question. It's a very obvious question, I want to say, but I find, like, depending on who asks that, I give them slightly different answers, and it's a bigger answer than any one of those. I've always liked traveling. I was very lucky when I was young to have parents that decided that traveling was very important, so I got to go on a couple of vacations and visit Europe. So I've always, and Europe and mostly stuff across Canada, but just getting into the habit of getting out of the normal space was a big thing. So that has I attribute that as having instilled a bit of a lust for adventure in me. I like changing scenes. I don't like the idea of being in one place forever. I have nothing against it, and I certainly love the idea of home.
Oh yeah.
But you know, you gotta adventure. You gotta get out there. You gotta see what's happening. So that was an underlying part of it. Is I found, especially in Toronto, it's a great city to be in when you're an established act, but it's not a very easy city to differentiate yourself in. I say this a lot because the scene is so massive. It's like, it's amorphous. It's hard to identify and nail down in a way that we don't really have over here. Like, there's just so much happening there that, like, oh, we're going to go to Toronto and we're going to be a touring act, so we know it'll you know, sell out well. It's like, well, guess what? There's actually like 7 other touring acts coming through in various parts in that city that marketed efficiently and did all the right things, right? So it's, I don't know, it's really hard to have hard-hitting shows there. There's certainly a scene. You can certainly get to a certain level, but to really develop into a professional level act or industry professional or artist, I certainly found myself kind of grabbing at straws and unsure of how to proceed. So I found I spent more than a decade just studying music privately. About 2 or 3 years of that specifically prepping for Humber's jazz guitar department, because I was certain that I wanted to study jazz guitar as a post-secondary. And I didn't end up having that happen for a couple of reasons, but it didn't happen. And as a result, my work started being less and less dependent on music. I taught for a little while, but I found, because of how expensive in that city it was to have your own space and own a car, that I basically had to bike to my students' classes and stuff like that. It was hilarious,
Wow.
man. And it was teaching, so it's always in the middle of winter. So I would literally hop on my bike with my guitar on my back and bike over through snow that was sometimes feet high to my students' houses. My phone would freeze on my travel over there, and I'd go, oh shit. So I did that for a while, and I supplemented it with working in hospitality. And I just saw that my time and energy kept on moving further away from spending it all on music. And I started going, is that what I want? Like, I can get by doing this, but is that what I want to do? And I said, no, I'd rather take a risk, potentially, throw it all out the window, and really take a shot at doing the music thing. Like, really, how would I turn this into a career kind of a thing? And how would I actually make money and spend my life and time doing this? And I left Toronto. My mom had moved to Nova Scotia briefly, so I went over there for a couple of months. And I did a ton of journaling and taking notes, and I had identified a number of different sub areas in the music industry that I might be interested in, and things that I was skilled for, and rate of pay and available jobs, and all this kind of research. And I decided on a couple of different options. And the main one was sound recording and production, and sound design specifically. I still have a dream of working in film and any kind of audio for visual media, but film and TV for sure, and video games, because that's all growing in the industry.
Awesome.
And so I realized, sound recording and production, that's probably going to be the thing that's going. I mean, I can already teach, you know what I mean? I've already got a good head on my shoulders in terms of understanding what to do as a performer. I mean, I've worked in so many different capacities that I have a pretty good sense of, what's happening in a show from almost everybody's perspective, in terms of promoter, venue owner, band, etc. And the one thing that seemed to me to be the biggest benefit, for sure, was learning how to create recordings and stuff like that. So I looked at a bunch of options across Canada. I was this close to going to McGill for jazz guitar again, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna hit this place up in St. John's, because it was so I ended up going to CNA, which was quite reasonable in terms of price. St. John's always did strike me as, actually, I worked at a brewery briefly while I was in Nova Scotia, and I was working with a buddy of mine named Elliot, who was from St. John's, and he just talked, and it was his favorite place. He would just endlessly go on and on and on about how it's the best place to be. So that certainly factored into it, and I went, okay, well, listen, this is it's a 2-year program to learn how to do sound recording and production. It's kind of known around Canada as, certainly a musical center of Canada. I wouldn't say it's the only export of music by any means, but it's certainly, we all know Eyes the By. Everybody hears that in elementary school, and we go, oh, that's Canadian.
Yep.
So that's from St. John's. It's from Newfoundland. Oh, so check it out. Anyway, and that's what brought me down here, is that program. And it was a great program, and I'm very happy with how everything's turned out as a result. It hasn't always been easy, but it was undoubtedly the right decision, and it's been a great experience.
Listen, man, life is never easy. Once you take that risk, there's no looking back. It's just, getting to do what you are setting out to do, and then the rest you do after that is gravy. So we're very happy to have you here, Ben, and you've really, again, become a face of the heavy scene here in Newfoundland and Labrador. You've played in the award-winning band Slowpoke, and you've also played in the most recent band that I've got to known you about, with Paul Brake, Cameron Legg, and a couple of other people which names aren't striking me right now.
Keith and Adam Hearn, shout-outs. Yeah.
Shout out to you guys. And the band name is one of my favorite names right now, The Order of the Precious Blood. We'll get to Precious Blood in a moment, but I just want you to talk about a bit more about the heavy metal scene and the heavy scene here in Newfoundland and Labrador, because when it comes to talking about the music scene, we always think about traditional folk music, but
Hmm.
rock and pop music and country music has really exploded here. But no one really talks about the heavy metal scene that much. So for people who are not
Hmm.
familiar with the heavy metal scene here in Newfoundland and Labrador, what would you say about it and why?
It's not as small as any of you think. This is the first and most important thing I want to get into people's heads. There is a constant expectation from people that perceive themselves as the more professional side of the industry that really just have a preference in genre. Do you remember that video of what's his name? Frank Zappa talking about how he's talking about the recording industry and about how there were people that had no idea about music that were running the recording industry, and they would take a chance on anything. And as a result, you got a variety of really creative different artists that wouldn't necessarily follow the same kind of avenue musically or creatively, which is what I would argue is a major purpose of art. And I think that there's an expectation, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to put this on any individual person, but I think across Canada, there's an expectation that if you're playing punk rock or metal or any of these things, that it's almost a lesser art form. And I think a lot of the time people think or come to that conclusion because they perceive there's a more limited market. And while it's certainly not the same mass appeal level of something like pop country or something like that, which is great and does all its things. But there is a significant demand for this kind of stuff. And again, it's not necessarily that it's heavy metal or punk, but just high energy stuff that's not your traditional, that's not the, the stuff that mom and pops would go see. Stuff for the kids, right? And I'd say it's there. It's almost everywhere we look. We keep on saying, oh, there's probably nothing over there. Even Corner Brook, things are starting to pop off over there, which is fantastic. There's a band called Paranoia who have been coming up, a young group of lads that are doing some great work, and October Wasp, and I think I've heard some rumblings about even more projects coming out there. And it's great to see. It's great to see here and in Atlantic Canada as a whole. I'm very excited for potential connections to be made across province and stuff like that. But it's a great scene of great enthusiastic people, and you should check it out because it seems a little bit scary from the outside, but it's a really awesome space from the inside. As soon as you get in there, you realize how welcoming, and don't let the dance moves fool you. They're all a bunch of teddy bears, and
I mean,
what it is.
You're the biggest one of them all. I mean, you're the biggest teddy bear out there. I can just give you a squeeze right now.
Well, thank you, Zach Snow.
Again, for the record, I have not watched Game of Thrones in my life.
That's all right. That's all right. As long as you understand the reference I am making.
Listen, for any fans who are Game of Thrones fans, give it to me. I'll take it. But I got to experience Order of the Precious Blood at the Music Celebration Week 2023, and what an experience that was. Paul Brake is an absolute maniac, and I'll probably take that in the nicest way possible.
Yes.
But
he is.
Order of the Precious Blood is a group that you guys formed this past year. What an absolute adventure it is to see you guys live, and Paul Brake just going absolutely crazy. But you're no slouch either on the backup vocals as well, because you were in the award-winning band Slowpoke before that. But I want to talk about how this whole group came together in the first place. So how did you come up with Order of the Precious Blood, and what was the meaning behind the name?
Okay. This is going to be a long one again. But so the very first thing I got to say about that is back to the scene, actually. I will quickly say a couple other quick points. The connecting idea is there's a fantastic outlet called Heavy Newfoundland run by a guy named Greg Sweetapple, who's living in Montreal, of all places, originally from Overtown. And the entire crux of Precious Blood kind of establishing itself kind of circles around that. But I also quickly wanted to say about the scene, quick shout out to Kyle Crotty, who's been organizing a bunch of shows, younger gent that's just making things happen, creating opportunities for people. He's playing in Choke Slam and Cast Band, Colt and Kyle and the Ass Kickers, and I think there may even be more than that, but there's so many awesome bands in that scene. And shout out to anybody that's kind of just doing what they can in that scene to help create more opportunities for bands. There's honestly a lot of them, and it's great to see. But back to your question. So yes, Heavy Newfoundland. When I first came into the province, I was teaching at Music Collection for a while, and I was only working there part-time, really. Hours fluctuated, but
yeah.
So with my free time, I was also in CNA at the time, so I had a little bit of free time. And I started doing some writing for Heavy Newfoundland. I always, when I did that big bit of research, one of the side hustles I'd identified that might be fun, that I might be half decent at, was doing some music journalism, which primarily was like album reviews, and I enjoyed it, and it served its purpose. And what happened was I gave one of Paul's previous projects a review, and that's kind of how I found out about him. And I was like, okay, this guy can play and record and, write songs. He's a really strong songwriter. And I was like, okay, this guy's super talented. But at the time, Slowpoke, we had another drummer named Adam. So Slowpoke was myself, Cameron, and originally Adam Young, and pretty much consistently Adam Young. And Adam ended up having a couple of times where he had to leave the province. He had to go traveling, or I think there was a job at one point. And so that left Slowpoke kind of drummerless. So we ended up searching around for some drummers. And when Adam left the second time, was after I'd done that review of the album that Paul had played on, Paul's album, that Waste Case album. And he was such a wicked drummer on it. I was like, hey man, do you think you would want to play in Slowpoke? So we did a couple of jams to give it a shot. And it was good. It wasn't quite as intense as I think what Paul was ultimately aiming for, which is kind of what Precious Blood came out to be. But it was fun, and we all vibed well as musicians. And so what ended up happening is that didn't work out. Adam, our original drummer, came back, and then we were playing our album release show, which was with Chevy and oh my God, who else was on that? I'm pretty sure the Birchmen were on that, and that's it. Us, Chevy, and the Birchmen. So right before that, like a day before that, we had, or actually a few weeks before that, we'd gone to Corner Brook, and the band Ultimata, which was this fantastic metalcore project in out of Corner Brook, they wanted to come to town, and they were hoping to jump on our release show. Of course, we'd just done all the advertising, we'd planned all the time slots and everything, so it just didn't seem like an option. So what we ended up doing is Slowpoke, myself, Cameron, and a different Adam, not Adam Hearn, but Adam Young, got Paul to front us, and we did a bunch of hardcore punk covers so that we could facilitate these guys coming down from Corner Brook to play a show here and not lose their night, so that we could try to support them in some way.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't also use the Slowpoke name, so we were still able to play our show without hurting any kind of draw. And so we needed a name for the project, and we called it Hot Dog. And that was the first iteration. Yes, I bought a hot dog costume. We dressed Paul Breakup in said hot dog costume.
Oh my God.
And we played punk rock.
Oh,
we played punk rock for about 40 minutes.
That's
I encouraged everybody in the audience to show their appreciation by screaming, "Hot dog!"
Hot dog.
Or however else they feel like expressing their enjoyment. And it was a blast. It was a great time. And so we were like, okay, we got to do something again. And time went by, and Mr. Adam Young, not Adam Hearn, had to leave again. And I was talking to Cameron, and I was like, for Slowpoke, I was always kind of, I want to play guitar. That's always what I want to do. I like doing backup vocals. I like singing. I like playing bass, but I always like the idea of having a dedicated frontman. And even when we were playing in Slowpoke, I was always kind of keeping my eyes out in the peripheries for somebody that could be a dedicated frontman. Because, I mean, if you're trying to rock out and you're trying to play stuff that pushes your technical abilities on your instrument and you're trying to sing stuff that's going to, there's only so many things you can do. And I didn't want, especially with the kind of music and the people we're playing to and the scene and market we're a part of, I didn't want to lose the energy of kind of like going crazy on stage or trying to move around a bit. So Paul Brake seemed like the strongest option to me. And after Adam left, there was a bit of downtime. And I don't remember exactly how it started, but I reached out to Paul and was kind of like, hey, do you want to jam? And I reached out to Cameron too, just to kind of be like, hey, buddy, we don't have anything going because Adam's not around, but do you want to try jamming with Buddy over here? So we did, I think it was like one rehearsal, and we were like, yeah, let's do some shit. Like, let's just see what happens. So we actually spent most of that's not true, the end of 2021, let me get my years straight. Yeah, the end of 21 and all of 2020, almost all of 2022, songwriting. And what we would do is like every week we would just meet up and demo a tune pretty much every week. And we would talk about branding and we would do all of our game plan stuff. And in that leads to one of your other questions, as you asked, how did the name Precious Blood come about? And we literally spent, a good 2 months just coming up with every band name we could, writing it on a list. And when we set a deadline and then we're like, okay, we're going to start crossing these names off the list, find the ones that we know are not going to be it. We have our yeses, our maybes, our nos. And we had a list of yeses, but none of them really seemed like the one. And Paul goes, yeah, I had this other idea. I passed this building, this church that said, Precious Blood or something like that on it. That sounded cool. And we were like, yeah, that is really cool. And it was better than pretty much all the other names we had. And I think it was also the mind of Paul Brake that added the order of, I know it didn't come from me. And that is how the name was decided upon. And that was the early stages of what we did. So we demoed out more than a dozen songs at least. Did some planning about branding and how we want to. A big thing with that project, right, is we think about, I think a lot of musicians think about being artists as just what, the only way that they relate to their audience is their music. And that's true, but like the delivery mechanisms can be a lot more interesting than we make them out to be, especially when it's about advertising and making people aware of your stuff and like the cool games you can play with people to make things actually engaging and actually fun and not like a chore and not like, I love that thing where it's like, you should support our band because we're like starving independent artists. And it's like, I totally respect that. And I think I strongly urge people to look local for their musical interests. But I also think it's the band's responsibility to attract. Like, if you're not coming up with interesting ways to make people invest in you, it should never be a request. It should never be, please listen to my band. It should always be, we exist, by the way. Check it out. Right? And then people do, and they go, oh shit, like I should have been, like you actually care about what you're doing. They're actually thinking about this on many levels. So we spent some time thinking about those levels and doing a lot of prep for our November kickoff show. Was this big thing. We did a bunch of, multiple layers of postering and kind of cool world building stuff and kind of a bit of a wild goose chase that brought people to the venue while also doing some traditional advertising for it. And we sold that out. I think we were probably over capacity at that show. In fact, I know we were. Yeah. And that was the birth of Precious Blood. Oh, and of course, Barry and Adam coming in. That was Paul. As soon as we'd kind of gotten a good number of songs, we started talking about who else we could get in. Again, for a while, I want to play guitar. I'm like, I'm going to play the guitar player. And we kind of realized, there's not... It was kind of... They kind of left it up to me, and I was like, well, I know there's not a ton of bass players that specifically jump out at me that would be the ideal one for this project. But there are guitar players. So Paul knew Barry O'Keefe and Adam, and they both played together in Release the Hounds. So we tried them out, and it was it was a great fit. And boom, The Order of the Precious Blood is born, and boom, first show. And then after that, it was just a matter of spending. Well, and because we'd spent all that time preparing, we could then spend the rest of the time planning what our next steps were, which is why we had such a productive year. If you're trying to figure out what you're doing for branding, you're not going to have time to think about booking a tour, which, you know, success favors speed. And if you're going to release a project and you're going to release music, it's better to have it built up so that you can continue to establish engagement and continue to build. And again, it's not even established. Like, these words almost sound like they're bad words. But like, to keep on interacting with people and to keep on having something to say and to dish out, right?
Yeah. And it's all about that idea of like a philosophy of like, you know, working smarter versus working harder, because a lot of people, like, they really work their asses off, but like, if you don't really like have like a game plan set in stone when you go out to execute that plan, you're pretty much just running around like a chicken with your head cut off. But all due respect to all the musicians here, they all work their asses off. But just having the plan is really a really smart thing to do.
That's the most infuriating part of it, is it's never about how hard you work. There are some people that work so incredibly hard, but what they're trying to do is climb up like a 90-degree angle. And so you keep on going up a little bit and falling down, and you're spending so much work doing that. It's like, buddy, step back, look around. You can walk around that obstacle. You know what I mean? Like, it's exactly as you say. It's not a matter of hard work. It really is a matter of thinking about what you're doing. You know, I've seen so many musicians just burn them out taking every single gig that comes to them. And depending on the scene and the circuit and what the function of your band is, that's actually completely acceptable. If you're playing in the cover circuit, of course, yes. If you're playing as a solo performer to try to make some extra cash, of course, yes, play every single one. If you're trying to develop your band into a touring act or into a studio project, no, do not take every one. Like, think about what you're doing a little bit.
Yes.
And think 100%. About what you want to do, because when you think about where you want to be, you could actually get there. And there's nothing wrong with that either, by the way. Like, depending on where you are in your scene, where you are in your stage of development as a musician, like, if you're new to the scene in any respect, in terms of maybe you haven't played any shows before, maybe you've played shows but not in this area, like, getting your bearings and understanding what's happening, like, there's always a benefit. If you're playing music, there's something, that you're going to get for your career out of it, for yourself, your playing and all that stuff. But planning ahead worked for us. Has been good.
Oh yeah, for sure. And shout out to
It's only a year. It's only a year. So far we had a good year. I'll say that.
For sure. But you had like other stuff to prepare you for this moment with Order of the Precious Blood, and you guys had a really successful year. And 2024, I feel, is going to be even bigger than that. But in 2023 as well, you took on Music Celebration Week coordinator for the past Music Celebration Week in St. John's. Of course, your boy took home Media Person of the Year. That was a great moment for me. But also we had thank you. But I feel like it was also a really strong week when it comes to the music that came out this year, because I felt that 2023 has been the most consistent year that Music NL has ever put out, just due to the fact that, like, I even said in my speech where I took home that award, where someone like Greg Wells, who is a multi-time Grammy Award-winning producer, taking the time out of his schedule to come down here and actually cultivate the Newfoundland and Labrador music scene and help it grow, that says a lot about how far it has come over the past couple of years. But back to the Celebration Week coordinator for a second.
Does it make you excited?
Oh, 100%. So how did this gig for Music Celebration Week coordinator come up for you?
So I got that through a lovely thing called the JCP. It's called the Job Creation Partnership Program. I had just left my position at music director at School of Rock, and I was on employment insurance, and I happened to see this posting, and I snagged it. And it just so happened that, to your point, in the same way that I'd done all these previous projects and that had gotten my name out a little, or given me a skill set for Order of the Precious Blood, had prepared me in some way. So too, the fact that I've been playing around a bit, I did a solo tour previously as my solo acoustic act, which was still branded as Benedict Drinks. I believe I attribute it to that, but it seemed that my name was a little bit more out there. So I found out that when they were looking at candidates, in addition to the fact that my resume looked good and appropriate, there were a couple of people that recognized my name and knew that I would be someone that had the background and skill set and demeanor to be able to do this kind of a thing. And I've been made aware that that was kind of a major deciding factor in how I got the position. So honestly, I would say it's luck. I would say it's luck and wicked good timing. And you know what? I'm also going to throw it to the fact that I believe that annually Music NL hires for that position in a similar kind of way. And I think that that's just great because the function of that program is to give people training opportunities to enter into this side of the industry, or really any kind of training opportunities for any industry. But specifically, this connection ended up being a fantastic. It's fundamentally a referral training program, and it was absolutely great. I'm just finishing it up now. We've got a couple weeks left, and yeah, that's how it came across, and very, very grateful for it.
Absolutely. Now, you got some big plans for 2024, I would imagine. So, without going really too deep and not revealing too much, knowing, when we're recording this and when this is going to come out, what are your plans for 2024? What are the plans for Ben Chapman-Smith?
There's a lot, as you say. There is some fun stuff coming in from Precious Blood. We're not slowing down. We've got some more recording projects coming through. You can expect some more performances, of course. I'm not sure if I can say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, because probably by February this will be out anyway. We are going to be performing at the ECMAs, the 2024 ECMAs in PEI, at part of a general showcase. I can't remember if I've mentioned that yet. But that's going to be a big and exciting thing, and we are considering some more stuff that's outside of the province, which would be sweet. And maybe a big something that I'd really like to do is try to create more opportunities to link St. John's and Corner Brook, and especially for the heavy scene, try to just get some more original bands going in there. I think outside of the heavy scene, there's a fairly limited music scene, from what I've heard, in terms of bands, I should say.
Yeah.
So that would be great. For myself, I've got a bunch of stuff, man. I'm trying to get some more recording under my belt, not necessarily just as a performer, but as a tech. I graduated sound recording and production, so I'm going to continue doing freelance live gigs. So if you are looking for somebody, give me a shout. If you're looking for somebody for any kind of audio for film or TV work, give me a shout. Twice, please.
Awesome.
That's certainly something I'd be very interested in, but don't have any immediate plans for. I'm going to have my position with Music NL is being extended a little bit with a group called Youth Ventures, and that's going to involve some interesting mentorship opportunities for people under 29, and I have to get a little bit more information on exactly how this is going to function. But it's going to involve some kind of presentations geared towards younger people that are trying to develop and establish careers for themselves within the music industry. I can't say too much if that's going to be specifically focused on artists or if there will be avenues for industry professionals. But what I am hoping to do is to have both. But that's not totally, all set yet. So that's hopeful. 2024, yeah, I'm working with a couple of younger groups to help kind of establish themselves within the scene, and that's one of them. I think two of those are going to be doing more of the kind of metal and rock scene, and one of them is going to be proper into the cover scene, cover circuit. And I don't know, man, like I have a tendency to plan ahead for a lot of things, but life has a funny way of showing up and going like, You can keep this, but you can't have that. But here's this.
Yeah,
Things
absolutely.
you never expect. You think you have everything figured out, and then a week later, it's like, oh, guess what? So I'd say beyond those couple of things, beyond continuing music and all, at least early on into the year, and Precious Blood recording and stuff like that, my own, teaching and recording and production and live sound stuff. That's most of it. I'd be hopeful for more. It would be awesome if I can find a way to participate in this year's Music Celebration Week, because I feel I learned a lot from the first one, and I think that I could contribute a lot more to a subsequent one. But that's, we'll leave that to the cards. We'll see what happens.
And for people who want to keep track of what you're going to be up to next with Precious Blood, yourself, and anything else Ben Chapman-Smith, where can they go?
Great question. You can certainly follow Precious Blood on, almost any social media. It's Precious Blood 709 on Facebook and Instagram. I believe TikTok is the same. We have a YouTube. We don't use those other ones quite as much, primarily Instagram. And then for myself, you can follow me at Ben Chapman-Smith Music. I've got Facebook and Instagram set up. Most of the time right now, it's kind of, it's a funny combination of family-friendly content from, my teaching stuff, and then pictures of hardcore punk shows, and then the odd reel of traditional Newfoundland music. So it's a really funny amalgamation of where I just kind of show you what I was doing that day, kind of a thing. It's not the best planned account, I'll tell you. But if you are curious at what I'm up to, you can certainly keep track of it there, and you can reach out to me there too. So again, if anyone's interested in doing some recording or needs a live audio tech for anything, you give me a shout.
Man, Ben, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on this podcast, getting to know a lot more about you, and what a blast this has been. This is not your last time on the podcast. We've only just scratched the surface on everything Ben Chapman-Smith. So, Ben, thanks so much for joining me on NextIIConnect. You have a wonderful day, and hopefully we have a big 2024 from Ben Chapman-Smith.
Thank you so much for your time, Zach Snow. Happy 2024, everybody.